All right, so you were to have read Genesis 29 through 50, big chunk, had a lot of days to do it. So I'm certain there are probably things in there that you don't remember ever hearing before, or maybe some things you do remember reading about or hearing about, but maybe there were some things in there that were surprising or unusual or that stood out to you. So it's open for you to contribute. What did you see there in those chapters, Mia?
I never remembered reading about everyone's like death and their burial. Even Joseph, I don't remember reading about that. So.
Yeah, well, in a Sunday school class, you probably don't have too many lessons on somebody dying,
No.
right? So that might explain that. So deaths and burials. What else?
Just like the Jacob wrestling with God. I never heard about that.
Okay.
Until
Jacob wrestling with God, and also called the angel of the Lord, which we talked about earlier today in Bible class. Well, I hope you're having a good discussion at home, talking about things that are in those chapters, because we're not getting much here. Nothing else. You knew everything was in there. Nothing new. Nothing else stood out. You guys are regular scholars. Is that it? Okay. Well, we're not going to belabor it. Maybe I should start giving quizzes over your reading, because I got a feeling that you're not accomplishing what we want to here. All right, we're looking at Egypt. We have looked at the first of the three major sections of the history, the ancient history of Egypt. What are the three major divisions of Egypt's ancient history? What's the first one? Old Kingdom. And what's the next one? Middle Kingdom. And the last one? New Kingdom. And in between each of those major divisions, there's also times called intermediate time. So we have finished the Old Kingdom, and we're ready now to move on to what is the first intermediate time period, which is during the 9th and 10th dynasties. This is when Genesis 12 through 50 comes into play. It begins at this time. It's going to proceed through not only the first intermediate, but we'll see into the middle kingdom as well, and after. All right, so in the first intermediate period, it's called intermediate because this is a time when there is not a strong central government. In fact, during this period, there is civil war and division. There are two cities that compete for power, Heracleopolis and Thebes. Now, that was not their name at that time, but those are the two cities as they're known, who are fighting for control of Egypt. During this time, interesting that history tells us that Bedouins from Asia settled in the Delta region. Now, what are Bedouins? We've talked about that word before. What are Bedouins? If you've written anything past this, stop. I want you to think about what we're doing here. You can write the rest of it when we get to it. What are Bedouins? Nobody knows what is a Bedouin? I think that was even on your first quiz, wasn't it? A Bedouin is someone who wanders, someone who does not have a permanent place to live. Usually they're sheep herders, and they travel from place to place. Well, there were some Bedouins from Asia that settled in the Delta region, which would be the region here where it empties into the Mediterranean Sea, here. From Asia, that could have been any number of different people. But it just shows how people were going back and forth. Asia would have been anywhere up into the area of Canaan, over into Babylon. Those are all parts of Asia. And so there were people, and we know that in the land of Canaan that there were a number of shepherds in that area and in the areas nearby. All right, so Bedouins from Asia settled in the Delta region, and in the Civil War between Heracleopolis and up there and Thebes, which I'm not seeing on here. Oh, there it is. Down here, Thebes was the winner, in case you had money bet on which one would come out on top. As you look at the literature of the time, there's a lot of pessimism. So people weren't very happy, hopeful about what was going to happen or with the things that were going on. There was a movement from a centralized government and having a pharaoh to just more local governments. And in the Old Kingdom, who was it that participated in life after death? Who had life after death in the Old Kingdom? Pharaoh. But it didn't extend anywhere else. But during this time period, because Pharaoh no longer is in the position of authority and considered a god, life after death was extended beyond Pharaoh and his royalty to other people. So others began to think that they would have life after they died. All right? So that's the first intermediate period, a time of civil war, decentralization, and expanding of life after death to others besides the Pharaoh and his family. All right. Now, as a part of this time period, as we look at the Bible, we have what's called the patriarchal period. So it's during this first intermediate period and then into the Middle Kingdom that we have the patriarchs. The patriarchs are the fathers. That's what that means, beginning with Abraham. So the family of Abraham is pictured here. We know that his father was Terah, and then we have Abraham here who married Sarah. They had a son Isaac who married Rebekah, and then they had two sons, Esau and Jacob. And then we center on Jacob. We see Jacob had 12 sons through 4 different women, and eventually the tribe of Judah produces David, and then eventually Jesus Christ. So these guys are important because they're part of the history of the ancestry of the Messiah, and also give us a lot of lessons about life as well and about God. So this is the time of the patriarchs, beginning in the intertestamental period and then moving into the Middle Kingdom period, which is where we're going to look now. And we'll see that, well, we saw before that Abraham may have had an influence on pharaohs even in the Old Kingdom period, and then we move forward through the years, we find that the rest of the family is going to have interaction with Egypt from time to time. So following the intermediate period, then we go to the Middle period kingdom. The intermediate period, as you may have noticed, only lasted 2 dynasties. I'm not sure. The years is probably only around 100 years or less. We get to the Middle Kingdom, it's going to last a little bit longer. It also includes 2 dynasties, but those dynasties lasted longer. Those families were in control longer than during the intermediate period. During this Middle Kingdom period, centralized authority was restored. So Pharaoh became powerful again and gained control over the entire country. He established what might be called a feudal state. How many of you are familiar with feudalism? Have you studied feudalism in the Middle Ages in Europe? No? Never heard of feudalism? Feudalism is when you have lords, landowners, who have people working their land for them, sometimes called serfs, sometimes called peasants, and most of the people are workers who are tied to the land, almost slaves. But they are the workers for whoever owns the land. And as this Pharaoh comes into power, as the Middle Kingdom the kingdom is restored in the Middle Kingdom period, a feudal state is established, where there's royalty, there are people who are lords that own land, and people are living on that land working for them. And during this, the pharaoh becomes powerful again. It's interesting that as you consider the fact that during the Old Kingdom is when the pyramids were built, that during this Middle Kingdom is when the social pyramid was built, if you were. And by social pyramid, we're talking about the division between different classes of people. And it ends up being shaped like a pyramid. So at the top of the pyramid, you have Pharaoh. He's the very pinnacle. Under him, you have priests and nobles. And then you have the merchants. And they form pretty much the middle area of the pyramid. As you go down the pyramid, it gets wider because there's more people in each of these levels. And then you have the common people, and at the very bottom you have the foreign slaves, which is the majority of the people are foreign slaves. So that is the way that society is organized during this Middle Kingdom period. During this period of time, civilization flourished. Things were going well for them. Here's another way that the social pyramid is pictured in a book. You can see the pharaoh up here, and then here's the next level, and then it goes down further. We'll probably get down here to the slaves. So looking at it from a people standpoint. All right, so the centralized authority was restored during the Middle Kingdom period. Civilization flourished. Bureaucracy positions were given to talented people. Bureaucracy has to do with all the government agencies that there are to run a country. And oftentimes, when you have bureaucracy, those people that are running the different parts of the government are there because they're related to somebody. But in this case, it became more important that you were talented enough to have that position. So that was an important advancement, an important feature of the Middle Kingdom period, which makes it strong. The mining industry and agricultural program flourished. So they found metals to mine, as well as rocks. Agriculture was doing well with the flooding the Nile and planting. So this is a time of great prosperity for Egypt during this Middle Kingdom period. Any questions? Now you might be interested to know what were the leading causes of death during the Middle Kingdom period. Well, here they are. One cause of death was schistosomiasis. Try saying that with a mouthful. Schistosomiasis is pictured here. It is a parasite that is in a snail, and it comes out of the snail into the water, and then when people are in the water, it enters into their bodies, and in fact, as it's in a person's body, he might pee it back into the water again. So it makes a cycle here, and this disease, because people were in the Nile River bathing and so on, it was a disease they picked up, and it killed people. Another disease, or cause of death, is called scarred lung tissue. That simply means their lungs were scarred. Scarred from what? What would scar their lungs, inside their lungs, to make it hard for them to breathe and eventually die?
The sand.
The sand, exactly. So there's breathing the air, there's sand in the air. They got used to it, but it damaged their lungs. So we know that that was a leading cause of death. A third leading cause of death was severe tooth wear. In fact, I've read of people dying from an infection from a tooth. In fact, I think it was Akhenaten, the pharaoh, that died from a bad tooth. So why would their teeth be worn down? Why would their teeth wear away, leaving them exposed to infection? What would cause their teeth to wear? about what Zach said. What about the sand? Are they eating sand?
No.
Or are they? Yeah, well, there's sand all over the place. And in the food they ate, there would be sand, just because it's in the air. So they actually were. I think did I tell you about flying into Cairo, what it looked like? How everything was brown,
Oh.
because the sand just blowing in all the time off the desert. Everything was covered. So while they're eating, it was imperceptible maybe to them, but there's sand in their food, and so that just wore away their teeth. So not too exciting of a way to die, but these are the leading causes of death during the Middle Kingdom period. Most Egyptians died between the ages of 35 and 40. So none of them too exciting. Now, we want to see who was it that came into the land of Egypt that we know during this time. During the middle period time, or the Middle Kingdom time, we have a guy by the name of Joseph. You know Joseph? Yeah. He was sold by his brothers into slavery. You read about that. And as he went down into Egypt, you know that he was a domestic slave in the house of Potiphar. And what happened then? What happened when he was in Potiphar's house?
His wife tried to make him sleep.
Right. His Potiphar's wife was trying to get Joseph to come to bed with her, and how did Joseph respond? Yeah, he refused, right? And so as he was getting away from her, she grabbed a hold of his robe, his garment, his coat, and told her husband that Joseph had forced himself on her. And what did Potiphar do? Right. So Joseph was put in prison. And we won't get into all the details of that. He was in prison for a long time. And while he was in prison, he was such a good prisoner that he was given authority in prison. And then through interpreting dreams of a couple guys that were there, you've read about this. I'm not going to go into the details there. He eventually was released from prison to interpret the Pharaoh's dream. The dream the Pharaoh had was indicating that there was going to be 7 years of prosperity followed by 7 years of famine. And Joseph suggested to him that you need to put somebody in charge of gathering as much food as you can from the 7 years of plenty so that when the famine comes, you'll have enough. And the Pharaoh said, I don't know anybody better than you to do that. So he appointed Joseph as his vizier. Remember that word? Remember we said before how Menes was the one that originated the idea of a vizier, and we would come to it later. Well, here it is. Joseph was the vizier for the Pharaoh. As a part of that, you know that the rest of what happened here, that eventually Joseph's family arrives in Egypt. So Joseph is there, and you know how they did. His brothers didn't recognize him at first, and all that goes on there. We're not going to go into that. You should know that already. So Joseph is sold to a caravan that takes him down to Egypt, where he is a slave of Potiphar and the vizier under Pharaoh. When Joseph's father Jacob and his brothers come down, Pharaoh gives them the land of Goshen, which is in the fertile Nile Delta. This is some of the best land that there is because the river's flowing this way and deposits all that rich topsoil right down there as the river slows down going into the Mediterranean Sea. So they were given good land down here in which to farm. Here's a picture of the land of Goshen today. It is still a very green area. Unfortunately, I did not take these pictures. We did not go there, but it's very plush. Now, you know that Joseph prepared for the years of famine by storing food, right? We know that. Did you know that you can still see where he built those warehouses? I did not know that, so I'm sure you didn't either. But here is Joseph's storehouses in an area called Fayum. This is a pyramid that was built there. Now, why do you build a pyramid? What's the purpose of a pyramid? What's the purpose of a pyramid?
Bury someone.
To bury someone. Now, was this for Pharaoh out here by these storehouses? No. Most likely, it's for the one who is out there building the storehouses. So I believe that that's probably a pyramid that was built for Joseph as the vizier. He's second in command in Egypt. So it's quite possible that that was built for him. It's still there. Just another picture of it from a different angle. Here's the opening into where the tomb would have been. There's a lot of dirt laying around. It's been covered over the years. Now, the storehouses are not there, but you can see where they were. All these collapsed areas that are there indicate where a storehouse was until it finally fell down. And so they know that that's where the storehouses were. So an amazing testament to what we know happened in the book of Genesis with Joseph. There's a closer view of them. Another view from the other side of Joseph's storehouse. This is an excavation of a building nearby that they found a bunch of pottery, and that's our guide Midu pointing out some things. Here's a lot of pottery that was there, and they're analyzing it to this day. They're looking at this. Here's part of a statue that was found there. Now the head is gone, as you can see. All we have is the torso. But our guide pointed out to us that the necklace that's on this torso is not the necklace that Pharaoh would wear. And yet, who would you have a statue of there at Joseph's storehouses? I would think Joseph. So I would imagine that's a statue of Joseph. Too bad we don't have the head so we can see what he looked like, right? But we do know that he was there, and he was honored with that. This is the entrance into the pyramid. He also built canals, because how do you get all that grain at the storehouses? You float it on water. Well, it's not in a place where there was any water. So he built canals to bring the boats in to unload the grain. And I'm going to have to stop there, and we'll have to come back tomorrow and see something else amazing that Joseph built that I never heard of before, and yet you can see it from space. We'll have to find out tomorrow what that is. Okay, don't forget to complete your reading interim report, and the code for world history is on Google Classroom. The code is NHIF6.